And what I'm going to talk about is how local governments interact with the department in relations to a right-of-way project. And basically, if you look at this slide here, local governments can have the responsibility of purchasing right-of-way in the state's name for the state. They can also purchase for the local government without reimbursement from the state. And there's a third thing that's not on the slide. If it's a TxDOT right-of-way project, TxDOT will be purchasing the right-of-way. Local government will contribute to the purchase of that right-of-way through a funding agreement. Probably the most important thing, though, is the bottom sentence, is that the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Policy Act must be adhered to. And why? Well, if there's any federal money anywhere on that project and the Uniform Relocation Act does not apply to, FHWA can come through and pull the federal money off that project. And if it's an egregious action, they can actually pull the federal money from that region, so that all federal money is pulled from all the projects in that region if it gets too egregious. So if you were going to build a 10 commandments of what to do in a right-of-way project, this would be the first commandment, is follow the Uniform Act. Local governments have also had to take on following the Uniform Act in their projects. Property Code Section 21046 was recently 2001 was amended by Senate Bill 18 to apply the Uniform Act to local governments when they are purchasing right-of-way as well. And so they have to develop their own uniform relocation program and provide relocation assistance and relocation payments to those individuals who are displaced by a right-of-way project. When we have a right-of-way project, we need to have a right-of-way agreement between the locals and the department. These come in several forms. It could be a contractual agreement to procure right-of-way. In that case, the local government is procuring the right-of-way in the name of the state for the state. It could be an agreement to contribute funds to the right-of-way project, where the local government will provide a percentage of the costs of the right-of-way project. Or if it's a local project, normally off-system project, you'll have a local advanced funding agreement that sets out what items will be reimbursable that FHWA will cover, that the feds will cover to the local governments. Some new changes in the Texas Administrative Code recently were passed, and we're now going to a standard agreement of a lump sum agreement. Prior to these changes, it was actual cost was what the local government was required to participate at. These agreements will make a lump sum where the local government will only have to participate to an estimated cost based on estimates of right-of-way and utilities. And after that, TxDOT and the department will not be coming back to them and saying, oh, well, we didn't get the right estimate. Our actual costs are $150,000 more. We're doing away with that, and we'll just be coming to the locals once for that participation. Of course, if you have a agreement, the locals cannot begin to purchase right-of-way until the federal funding is in place and you have authority to proceed. Any purchases before that, the feds will not participate in. So it's important that we're in contact with our local government partners and that we're relaying this information to them not to proceed until they have authority to proceed and federal funding is in place. Once that federal funding is in place, the locals can proceed with the acquisition. We have developed several guides on how the acquisition should take place. The Real Estate Acquisition Guide for Local Public Agencies. Hopefully, right away is in contact with the locals, with local government agencies early on, and is able to hand that to them, and so they can ask questions and keep us in the loop on what's going on and bounce things off of us and sound things off of us on issues that they're facing on that project. Here's a pretty simple version of the the acquisition process from start to finish. It starts with pre-appraisal contact. The Uniform Act and the federal regulations require that every landowner has the right to have their property appraised, and they have the right to accompany that appraisal, the appraiser, when they're on the property. And it goes through all the way through acquiring the property, either through eminent domain or by a deed. One of the interesting relationships that TxDOT has with local governments is that not only are we partners with the local governments in the project, but we also serve as FHWA's oversight on that project, meaning we have dual roles. We have to make sure the federal regulations charge TxDOT with being the oversight on that project, and we have to make sure the locals are following the Uniform Act and giving property owners their rights under the laws. And so it's an interesting relationship. The best way, I think, to do that is make sure that we're in constant contact with them, and we solve problems early on. Because the worst thing is to get to an end of the project and find that there's been all kinds of errors, mistakes, the Uniform Act hasn't been followed, and you're having to try to backtrack and hope that FHWA isn't going to pull money from a project. Some other issues that we run into with locals is surveying and right-of-way maps. The survey in the legal description is one of the most important things for right-of-way. I mean, that describes what property that you're going to acquire for the project that's going to be built. If you don't have the right property for the project, it's going to be hard to build that project. So we have some requirements. All surveying for right-of-way acquisition need to be reviewed by the right-of-way division. They must follow and be tied to the Texas State Plane Coordinate System, and GIS files must be provided, and they must conform with applicable surveying laws and the Professional Land Surveying Practices Act. For local government projects that are off-system, it's not required that you have a right-of-way map. It's really up to the discretion of the district whether or not you have a right-of-way map. I would say it's a good idea. Right-of-way map lays out the parcels of property in a picture that everybody can view and get the data of what's going on. And it's easy to pick out problems by looking at a right-of-way map. If you just have property descriptions, it's kind of hard to see how these properties line up and where the right-of-way is in relation to the center line and to the remaining property that's on the project.